My name's Lisa. I never expected to walk into that party and find my whole world spun on its axis. But there I was, standing next to Rachel, hoping for a few laughs and free drinks. All it took was his hey to turn an ordinary night upside down. Rachel, who's that? I nudged her side, eyeing the guy with the easy smile and hands shoved casually into his jeans pockets. Oh, that's James. She half shouted over the music, went to college with him. Real chill guy. You wanna meet him? Sure, I shrugged. New faces meant new stories, but nothing prepared me for the instant connection. James had this way of talking like you were the only person in the room. And those green eyes? They didn't hurt either. So, you like the Rolling Stones? He caught me eyeing his t-shirt. Vintage band tees were everywhere, but I actually meant it when I said, only someone who really digs good music would wear Mick Jagger on their chest. He laughed. Are you calling me out or complimenting me? Guess you'll never know, I teased back. We were inseparable by the end of the night. We spoke about everything, from our love for old-school rock to the names we'd pick for our future pets. He got my number and didn't wait the so-called appropriate 3 days to call. He rang me up the next morning. It wasn't long before we were deep in the what-ifs of tomorrow, and it didn't sound crazy to be picking out rings and talking about forever. But forever comes with its own baggage, like it or not. Meeting the parents was on the horizon, I knew that. But nothing prepared me for the icy reception at the dinner table. Margaret, James's mom, was the first to break the so-called ice. So, Lisa, you work at the hospital, right? It wasn't the warmth of polite interest that coded her question, but something harder, like I was being appraised. Yeah, the county hospital, up north, I said as confidently as I could. And how much do they pay you for that? Her eyes were sharp, her tone sharper. I paused, James shot me a look, but I decided to be upfront. Enough to get by. My answer was clipped, I hated talking finances. Well, James does more than get by, she said. I glanced at James, who was calm and silent. I felt my face heat up. So, about this marriage, she continued as if my income was just a segue. A prenup is sensible, don't you think? It was like a punch to the gut. But I said, listen, I don't care about money. But whatever happens, the bit I send to Granny B each month, it's non-negotiable. Fair enough, his dad finally chimed in, that seems reasonable. The tone for this commitment was set, tough, not all sunshine and romance, but it was real. And real was something I could work with. Our wedding could have fit in a matchbox, no fanfare, just him, me, and a couple of signatures that sealed the deal. In the beginning, we were a team, tackling life from our small joint command center, his old house he'd owned for years. We had set up a system, half on everything. When I think about that time, it seemed straightforward. We wrote up a budget, penciled in time for chores, and even cooking was something we did together. There was comfort in the routine, in knowing what to expect when we both got home. He used to count minutes until I got home. We'd link up in the kitchen, not just for the food, but for those moments, you know. It wasn't just about filling our plates, it was about sharing the day, stirring and tasting, and laughing over a shared bottle of wine. But reality is a tough customer. 4 months down the line, and the teamwork was taking hits. The excuses rolled in. At first, it was just a bad day here and there, a boss on his back or a project running him ragged. Babe, I'm beat, he'd say, dropping his bag by the door, not picking up the hints of garlic and basil in the air, the sound of something sizzling on the stove. Gonna crash for a bit. You mind finishing up? I didn't at first. Everyone's entitled to a bad day, right? But bad days started to string together like some lousy pearl necklace, each excuse shinier than the last. One night, I found him sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to some game on the TV. The floor was a maze of his work stuff, and the sink was an overstuffed exhibition of dirty dishes. Honey, the kitchen's blowing up, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You were supposed to handle it tonight. He gave me this quick glance, one of those, just a sec looks before focusing back on the players running across the screen. Yeah, I'll get to it. Just let me watch this play, he muttered, not moving an inch. But the plays went on, one after the other, and the kitchen stayed a mess. The tension was simmering, ready to boil over. Look, I don't need plays, I need a partner, I snapped, surprising myself a bit with the sharp edge in my voice. Chill, alright? It's just dishes, he shot back, his attention still on the game. We clashed like this, more and more. Those simple knots we tied at the mayor's office started to feel like some complex puzzles, impossible to solve. He retreated into his shell, all but locking me out. The split down the middle started to shift, what was meant to be equal began to weigh heavy on my side. Chores piled up, just like his excuses. That shared life we were supposed to be building felt more like a solo gig. 2 weeks of slugging it out on my own and I finally snapped. I never was one to kick up a fuss, but who could live like this? I cornered James as he walked through the door, oblivious with his headphones on. James, I blurted out, unable to hide the annoyance in my tone, what happened to sharing the load? He looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head, pulling off his headphones. What are you on about, Lisa? He asked, genuinely confused or a damn good actor. I spent nearly an hour scraping your dried-up yogurt off the coffee table this morning. It's like living with a toddler. He just shrugged. That bloody shrug, like he didn't have a care in the world. Chill out, will you? It's just a bit of mess. A bit of mess, he called it. So, I left his mess, stopped picking up his dirty socks, stopped doing his laundry. Petty? Sure, but I was at breaking point. Of course, that's when Margaret, his mother, decided to pop in unannounced. The perfect storm. Look at this place, she said, her nose crinkled as if she'd just found a rotten egg under her seat. I tried to keep cool, offered her a cup of tea, but she was on the warpath. James, this is no way for a man to live, she said sternly, eyes fixed on me. I didn't raise you to be living in a pigsty. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Margaret, it's a two-person job, and I've been doing it solo. I'm not his maid. You're his wife, she snapped back. And a wife keeps a clean home. I felt my face flush with anger. And what does a husband do, Margaret? I snapped back. He's the breadwinner, she hollered back, missing the irony that I too had a full-time job. Margaret threw her hands up in the air and turned to James. You're soft on her, she declared, as if I wasn't there. My Harold would have never stood for this nonsense. I wanted to tell her where Harold could stick it, but I held back. No point in making things nastier. Margaret stormed out, slamming the door with such force the family photos rattled against the wall. Now it was just me and James, standing in the rubble of our domestic battlefield. So James got knocked down a notch at work. He came home that day, dumped his keys like they were made of lead. They're cutting back, he said, the words hung heavy in the air. I'm off the management track. Just like that, he decides he's not gonna help with the bills no more. Suddenly, it's all on me. I was smacking pots and pans like they owed me money. The noise must have finally got to him. Why are you making such a racket? He asked, picking at his beer label. Because someone's gotta pay for those beers, I snapped. And keep this place looking half decent. What came next was like a round in the ring. You expect me to chip in after a day like today? He shot back. Yeah, James, I said, not backing down an inch. Because I had a cakewalk of a day, right? He didn't have a comeback for that. Just took another swig. We had a deal. We share this, remember? I said. James sat there, TV blaring, as if I wasn't even there. A deal doesn't hold when things go south, he said, not even looking at me. I stood in front of the screen. So, what? I'm supposed to just smile and nod and keep the house like some 1950s sitcom mom? He just glared at me then, no love there, only irritation. You wanted a partnership, here it is. This is life, deal with it. The words hung there, thick and toxic. His ignoring the problem wasn't going to make it vanish. We're supposed to be in this together. And that means not ditching out when it gets tough. I didn't ditch out. The job did. I wanted to shout, to yell, to make him see sense, but I knew it wouldn't get through. Instead, I let out a cold, hard laugh. Good, and I'll do what? I'm not your maid, and I'm not an ATM. We'll see how long that lasts, he muttered, barely audible over the din of the TV. I turned off the TV. We'll see how long we last if this is how it's gonna be. Silence filled the room, thick as the dirt I'd been cleaning all day. He looked away. I stormed off to bed. No more words that night, none that mattered anyhow. They were all bitter, all spat out with hurt more than real heart, but they stuck with me, like thorns in my side. The tension in the house was like walking into a wall of ice. Barely a word was passed between us without a sharp edge. James had taken to eating his meals alone, meals that Margaret dropped off with a thud at our door. I could hear the plastic containers hitting the wood, like the gavel of a judge passing sentence. So, what are we having tonight? I asked, poker-faced, as James marched past me, Margaret's cooking in hand. Does it matter? He barely glanced my way. It's not like you're eating. It was true. I didn't have the stomach for food, not for what was in those containers. It was more than lasagna or stew. It was a heavy dose of rejection, served up by Margaret, and it had seeped into every room of the house. Then Granny B called. Cheerful and active, I could almost smell her lavender perfume through the phone. A visit from Granny could turn a place upside down, and that's what I sorely needed. A gust of fresh air. I'm packing my bags, baby girl, she chuckled, but I heard the steel underneath, a will that had gotten her through tougher times than this. I need to see your life. I broached the subject over dinner, a silent affair, with the clinking of cutlery replacing conversation. Granny B wants to visit, I said, dropping the bomb without preamble. James paused mid-chew, his eyes hardening. Here? Stay with us? I nodded, gripping my fork like a lifeline. He shook his head, speaking with his mouth full like he suddenly forgot manners existed. No chance. Margaret wouldn't like it. Since when do we schedule our life around your mother? The boldness of my words surprised even me. Margaret's voice sliced through from the doorway. Since it's our house, girl. You just live here. The unfairness of it choked me like a noose. Your son and I are supposed to be building a life together, Margaret. She snorted. A life? You call this a life? Look at you two. I bring him food because someone needs to take care of my boy. James stood up, his chair scraping back like a scream. And that's how it's gonna be. No visits. No changes. It's settled. I looked between them, the mother and son, and I felt it, the outsider tag slapping against my chest. It's settled, because you say so? What about what I want, what I need? You need to understand that things are the way they are, James shot back, red, flushing his cheeks. My house, my rules. The ache spread from my heart to my fingertips, but I squared my shoulders. It's also my home, James. Or at least it's supposed to be. James had no answer, just the hard line of his jaw telling me the conversation was over. But nothing was settled. Granny B would come, somehow, I'd make sure of it. For the first time, I wanted the battleground. If they wouldn't budge, neither would I. There was fight in me yet, and the freeze in the house would need my fire to thaw it, whether they liked it or not. For the third month in a row, James did not contribute his share to our family budget. I was carrying everything, the house, the groceries, and even his damn beer. We had a fight. That fight had been the last straw. James and I stood, facing each other, our words sharp enough to slice through steel. The room felt smaller as the tension grew, air thick with resentments saved up from months of silent battles and unspoken words. "I don't want you as my wife," James said, his voice dripping with that finality I knew was the end of everything. It didn't come out as a shout. That might have been better, a shout I could have responded to with fury. Instead, it was a low hiss, a deflating tire's last breath, leaving behind silence that echoed louder than any scream. I gathered what was left of my dignity. "Fine," I countered with as much steadiness as I could muster, despite the tremor I felt within. "I don't want to be where I'm not wanted." He didn't stop me as I started to pack my bags. Each piece of clothing folded felt like a piece of the life we'd built being tucked away, rendered insignificant. I headed to the door, my suitcase a loyal companion trailing behind me. James was still standing in the center of the chaos, the eye of the storm that had hit us over and over until we'd broken, pieces scattered beyond collection. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me. The door closed with a click much too gentle for the ending it represented. Outside, Granny B was in her old, dependable car that smelled of leather and peppermint, leaning over to open the passenger door. I heaved my suitcase into the back and slid in beside her without a word. "All set, dear?" Granny asked, her eyes soft but her voice strong, a rock in a swirling sea. "Yeah, I'm set," I mumbled, buckling the seatbelt over the hollow feeling in my chest. Granny B didn't start the car right away. "He's a fool," she said flatly, adding an expletive that would have made a sailor blush. I choked out a strained chuckle. "Granny!" "Well, it's true." She finally turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life reassuringly. "You're worth 10 of him. 15, even." She backed out and we started towards the new apartment. I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape blur, the same way my thoughts were a jumble of memories and pain. Granny B didn't push with questions or platitudes. She just drove, every now and then muttering something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like curses aimed at James. The cozy rented apartment was in a normal neighborhood, a place where you could blend in and lick your wounds in peace. As Granny hauled my bag out of the car with surprising strength, I unlocked the door to the unknown. "Well," Granny said, clapping her hands together, "time to rebuild, kiddo. You've got a life to claim and that sorry excuse of a man to forget." I nodded, feeling the very first flutter of something like hope in my chest. Breaking points, I realized, weren't just about endings. They were about beginnings, too, messy, painful, but real. Fresh starts didn't erase the past, but they gave you a canvas to create something new. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. Granny B was sitting on my threadbare couch, her hands clasped over her knee, bouncing with what seemed like contained energy. Who knew that beneath that floral dress and the wrinkles was a woman with the heart of a Wall Street hustler? "So you're telling me, all the dough I sent you for your meds and stuff, you've been playing the market with it?" I stared at her in disbelief. Granny B chuckled and winked. "Honey, you think I'd let your hard-earned cash rot under a mattress? No way. I've been growing it, bit by bit." I was flabbergasted. It felt unreal. I crunched the divorce papers in my hand, knowing that what Granny B had just told me was going to flip the script in a major way. James and Margaret, the perfect couple from next door, agreed to meet us one last time. Probably thought they could offer me some friendly advice on starting over. Margaret opened the door, all fake smiles. "Well, if it isn't the soon-to-be single lady. Come in, we were just talking about you." James sat at the dining table, smirking without a care in the world. "Good of you to come by. We need to talk about the neighborhood, now that you'll probably be moving somewhere more, affordable." I clenched my jaw but remembered Granny's news. I needed this. "Actually, James, I won't be going anywhere." Granny B piped up. "She's got a juicy bit of news. Tell 'em, hon." I enjoyed the suspense stretching their faces tight. Turns out I got a little nest egg waiting for me. Granny's been smart with the money. James laughed, harsh and loud. What? Did you win the lottery or something? Granny B grinned, sharp as a tack. Better. I turned her spare change into a cool 2 mil. The smiles fell off James and Margaret's faces like overripe fruit. 2 million? Margaret's voice came out strangled. Yep, and I don't plan to spend it on this neighborhood. My words felt heavy as I watched their painted-on warmth crumble. Granny slapped a hand on her thigh, triumphant. Ain't that something? Just when you think life's kicked you, it decides to kiss you instead. James started babbling something about how half of this money belongs to him. I burst out laughing, reminding him of the prenuptial agreement I had signed. I swear, at this moment, his mother would like to go back 6 months to destroy this paper. James and Margaret sat in silence, looking at us with puppy dog eyes. I couldn't help but relish the irony. We didn't linger much longer, there was nothing left to say. As we walked out, Granny B draped an arm around my shoulders. So, what's first on the millionaire to-do list? She asked, squeezing me tight. First, I'm getting an ice cream. A big one. With all the fixings, I said, the future suddenly bright and wide open. Granny let out a hearty laugh, the sound mingling with the promise of an unseen fortune, now seen, and closer than ever. The phone rang again. I was pretty sure it was James trying his luck once more, but this time, it went straight to voicemail. I had stuff to sort out and no desire to entertain that mess. I heaved a sigh, looking around my cramped apartment cluttered with memories, too many of them pinned to James and his shadow that loomed like a bad smell. Grandma, with her sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, was right as rain. Why do you even keep that thing on? Grandma gestured at the phone with a scoff, busy shuffling through a pile of real estate listings. Shrugged, I tossed the phone on the couch. Guess I'm too soft. Squishy as overripe tomato, she snorted. We need to get moving. I don't want James or his mama knocking on our door, trying to weasel back into our lives when we've barely shucked 'em off. I know, Grams. Thanks. I flashed her a grateful look. So, where to? She slapped a listing onto the kitchen table. It was circled in bold. Here. 2 bedrooms, cleaner air, away from unwanted pests. I skimmed the details. Looks decent, Grams. Any pizza joints nearby? The next day dawned fresh. We were off, the apartment ad in hand and a skip in Grandma's step. The listing agent met us at the property, all smiles and slicked back hair, reeking of too much aftershave. Welcome, ladies. He extended his hand right at Grandma. She eyed it like it was a dead fish, but shook it all the same. Cut to the chase, hotshot. We're not here for pleasantries. I bit back a laugh as the agent's smile twitched. Of course, of course. He quickly unlocked the door. This way, please. The place was a gem compared to where we were. Good light, clean floors, and the air didn't hold any of James' cologne. Grandma haggled like she was born in a market stall. The price dropped. Terms changed. By the time we walked out, the agent looked 2 inches shorter. The move went smooth. Neighbors were quick to say hi, a couple of them inviting us over for beers and a barbecue. Asked about my story, but I kept it simple. I was done letting my past hitch a ride. The new place shaped up nice. I continued to work as a nurse. Grandma found her corner for knitting and gossiping with Mrs. Ham from next door, who had more sass packed in her tiny frame than anyone I'd ever met. One evening, I grabbed a pizza, from the new joint, of course, and headed home. As I flipped open the box, the steam carried that cheesy aroma up, and I couldn't help but smile. And so we settled in, me and Grandma, our little team. The taste of fresh starts and thick crust pizza in the air, laughter from the neighbor's yard spilling in through our open window, and a sense of peace finally making itself at home. James and his empty promises faded into the background noise, just like the buzz of the city we'd left behind. I was looking forward, and the view was pretty damn good.